the Global Conference on Cooperation on Enforcement Matters, Global Conference on Cooperation on Enforcement Matters, GCCEM. Now, what is this global conference meant for? The inaugural Global Conference on Cooperation in Enforcement Matters was organized by the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, which was recently concluded in New Delhi. This is the first ever session that was conducted and it was concluded in New Delhi. The session focused on narcotics and the linkage between money laundering activities and cross-border smuggling of contrabands, including precious metals and gems. What are the outcomes of this session? The session has reinforced the need for cooperation among customs administrations, international organizations and law enforcement agencies in their collective fight against cross-border organized crimes. What is Directorate of Revenue Intelligence? DRI is the apex or the highest anti-smuggling agency of India, working under the supervision of Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs under the Ministry of Finance. What are electronic negotiable warehouse receipts? The negotiable warehouse receipt system was launched in the year 2011, which allows for the transfer of ownership of a commodity that is stored in a warehouse without actually having to deliver it physically. It is an electronic negotiable warehouse receipt. These receipts are issued in a negotiable form, making them eligible as collateral. Now, some important information about the electronic forms of negotiable warehouse receipts. It is a digital or online warehouse receipt which is issued by a registered warehouse. It is regulated by the Warehousing Development and Regulatory Authority, which is a statutory body. What are the benefits of the electronic negotiable warehouse receipts? Centralized online real-time record keeping, and it also encourages easy transfer of receipts. It also ensures that the commodities are stored in the warehouses, are tracked and are secure and safe. Adaptation Report or Adaptation Gap Report 2023 released by the United Nations Environment Program. Now, what is this Adaptation Gap Report that is released by the United Nations Environment Program or UNEP? What is adaptation? Adaptation is a process of reducing the country's and communities' vulnerability or risk to climate change effects by increasing their impact absorption ability. Adaptation gap is the difference between implemented adaptation and societally set goals. This adaptation gap is determined by the preferences related to climate change impacts and reflecting resource limitations and competing priorities. Some of the key highlights of the Adaptation Gap Report that was released by the UN Environment Program. Adaptation finance needs. The needs for the adaptation finance are 10 to 18 times more or higher than the current public flows. The adaptation finance gap is expanding and it is now at $194 to $366 billion annually. So, the adaptation finance gap is expanding and it is now in the range of $200 to $366 billion and it is on an annual basis. The action plan on loss and damage has overlooked non-economic losses like the cultural heritage and indigenous knowledge systems. And only 20% of the gender tagged international adaptation finance is gender responsive. These are some of the key highlights of the Adaptation Gap Report released by the UN Environment Program. Now, what are the recommendations that are made in the Adaptation Gap Report of 2023? Developed countries should double their climate finance for adaptation from the existing 2019 levels by 2025. So it has emphasized on the need for enhancing the developed countries' climate finance for adaptation from 2019 levels by at least by 2025. Also to increase and improve budget tagging and tracking for integrated adaptation into budget planning. Also it aims at mobilizing private investments by methods like resilience bonds and insurance. It also stresses the need for leveraging the remittances, which often contribute significantly to the gross domestic product, by way of financing small and medium enterprises or SMEs, stimulating them to offer adaptation relevant products and services, and by way of implementation of the article number 2.1 clause C of the Paris Agreement, making finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low carbon and climate resilient development. These are the various recommendations which are made by the Adaptation Gap Report of the UN Environment Programme. Now, some important information about the UN Environment Programme, UNEP. United Nations Environment Programme is the leading environmental authority in the United Nations. It is founded in the year 1972 following the UN Convention or UN Conference on the Human Environment. UN Conference on Human Environment. What are the objectives of this UN Environment Programme? To contribute towards building a culture of peace and also towards eradication of poverty and promoting sustainable development and intercultural dialogue through education, sciences, culture, environment and communication and also information. What is the mandate of the UN Environment Programme? To find solutions to triple the planetary crisis, that is climate change, nature and biodiversity loss and pollution and waste. It has a total of 193 member countries and India is also a member of UN Environment Programme. Emission Gap Report and the Global Environment Outlook. Emission Gap Report and the Global Environment Outlook are the two other initiatives of UN Environment Programme. Also in news was the Financial Action Task Force, which has released a report on the crowdfunding for terrorist financing. Some of the key highlights of this report of the FATF on crowdfunding for terrorist financing include: the terrorist organizations are resorting to crowdfunding to support their antisocial and illegal operations. The methods used by these terrorist organizations in crowdfunding include humanitarian, charitable and non-profit causes. They serve as effective covers for financial solicitation and can be abused also for terrorist financing. Dedicated crowdfunding platforms. The volume and the variety of activity on crowdfunding platforms make it more difficult to detect the illicit activities. Social media platforms and messaging apps shall allow extremists to amplify their messages, reinforcing the extremist belief systems and also leading the users towards specific fundraising causes. Interaction of crowdfunding with virtual assets or VAs. Virtual assets such as Bitcoin, privacy coins, etc. can also be used to conceal the origin and the destination of the funds which are linked to terrorist financing. These are some of the key highlights of the report of the Financial Action Task Force on crowdfunding for terrorist financing, and these are some of the methods which are used by the terrorist organizations for crowdfunding, for funding their activities. Challenges in crowdfunding ecosystem in deterring the terrorist financing. Now, what are the various challenges in the crowdfunding ecosystem in order to deter the terrorist financing. It is very difficult to prove that the fund is used for terrorist financing, and also the use of anonymous techniques and the complexity of crowdfunding networks. These are various challenges in crowdfunding towards terrorist financing and its deterrence. Now, what are the recommendations made by the FATF report on crowdfunding for terrorist financing and to destroy the terrorist financing activities, including crowdfunding in national risk assessments? To include crowdfunding as an integral part of national risk assessments in respective countries, and also making crowdfunding platforms accountable and responsible, fully implementing the FATF standards relevant to virtual assets and non-profit organizations, etc. By fully implementing the FATF standards that are relevant to virtual assets and non-profit organizations, these are some of the recommendations made by the FATF report. Now, what is FATF? Financial Action Task Force is established in the year 1989 as a global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog, and India is also a member country in FATF. Countries which repeatedly fail to adhere to the FATF standards can be placed in its either grey list or blacklist. Some important background information or some facts regarding crowdfunding. In crowdfunding, the crowd funds the idea or project through an online platform, basically the internet or social media. The crowd funds for the idea or the project through online medium such as either the internet or social media. This is crowdfunding. Now, what about traditional or conventional funding? The traditional or conventional fundraising activities consists of asking for a sum amount from a limited set of sources. The sources are limited in conventional and traditional fundraising, whereas when it comes to crowdfunding on online platforms, we have a lot of opportunities by way of internet and also the proliferation of social media. Crowdfunding is an entirely legitimate way of soliciting and obtaining funds, and the vast majority of crowdfunding is considered to be legal or legitimate. However, the crowdfunding can be used for a variety of purposes, which may include disaster relief, supporting community causes and organizations, and also used for political campaigning. Also in news was Russia, and it has revoked its ratification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, or famous as CTBT. Russian government has revoked its ratification of Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Russia has withdrew from the ratification of CTBT to bring itself in line with the United States. United States of America has not ratified the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty by citing some difficulties in verifying whether or not the participant states are meeting the rules of treaty. So, the United States of America is yet to ratify the treaty, whereas the Russian government has recently withdrawn its ratification from the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty to bring itself in line with the United States. Now, what is this Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, or CTBT? CTBT aims at prohibiting or banning all nuclear explosions, either for military purposes or peaceful objectives. It aims at fully banning all the kinds of nuclear explosions, whether it is used for military or peaceful purposes, it does not matter. It also seeks to establish CTBT organization, or CTBTO, to verify the ban or the implementation of the ban and the provisions in the treaty worldwide. Its verification regime includes International Monitoring System or IMS, International Data Center or IDC, and on-site verifications inspections team. This comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty was opened for signatures in 1996, and it has been signed so far by 187 nations and it is ratified by 178 nations. This treaty is yet to be formally entered into force as it requires ratification by 44 specific nations, 8 of which are yet to ratify. In order to fully come into force, this comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty requires ratification by 44 specific countries. Out of these, 8 countries are yet to ratify the treaty. What are these 8 countries? United States, India, China, Pakistan, North Korea, Israel, Iran and Egypt. These are the 8 specific countries which are yet to ratify the treaty, and hence this treaty is still not effective, it still did not come into force. India has neither signed nor ratified the treaty because it considers the treaty to be discriminatory and disadvantageous. India, however, calls for a universal and a complete nuclear disarmament in a time-bound and a phased manner. India is also wanting to achieve a universal and a complete nuclear disarmament in a time-bound and a phased manner. Compared to more than 2000 nuclear tests between 1945 and 1996, less than a dozen or 12 nuclear tests have took place or conducted following its adoption in the year 1996. So, from 1945 till 1996, more than 2000 nuclear explosion tests have been conducted. But after the adoption of this treaty, a little over 12 nuclear explosions only have been conducted. Other nuclear weapons control treaties other than CTBT include Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons 2017. It includes a comprehensive set of prohibitions on participating in any of the nuclear weapons activities. India did not sign this Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, also known as Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty or NPT, 1968. This treaty tries to avert the danger of nuclear war through prevention of wider dissemination of nuclear weapons and other measures. India also did not sign this Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968. Partial Test Ban Treaty of 1963. India has signed and ratified this treaty. This treaty bans nuclear weapons tests in the atmosphere, in the outer space and also underwater. Partial Test Ban Treaty 1963 was ratified and signed by the Indian government. It prohibits or it bans nuclear weapons tests either in the atmosphere or outer space or underwater. India did not sign the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons 2017. India also did not sign the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons 1968, but India signed and ratified the Partial Test Ban Treaty of 1963. Also in news was Energy Efficiency Services Limited, which has launched National Efficient Cooking Program and Energy Efficient Fans Program. The Energy Efficiency Services Limited has recently launched National Efficient Cooking Program and Energy Efficient Fans Program. So, what is this? What are these initiatives? These initiatives aim at enhancing the energy efficiency and also to reduce carbon footprint in the Indian households. National Efficient cooking program initiative and some of the key highlights in it. It aims at deploying 20 lakh or 2 million induction cook stoves across India. 2 million induction cook stoves across India. It focuses on non-solar or electricity based induction cook stoves, aligning with the Go Electric initiative by the Ministry of Power. It focuses on non-solar and electricity based induction cook stoves in tune with the Go Electricity or Go Electric initiative by the Ministry of Power. This National Efficient Cooking Program is a subset of the Clean Cooking Scheme of the Government of India. It is a sub-scheme or a subset of the Clean Cooking Scheme, which is an initiative of the Government of India. Now, what is this Energy Efficient Fans program? It aims at distributing 1 crore energy efficient fans that can reduce nearly 20% of the total residential electricity consumption. 1 crore energy efficient fans to reduce nearly 20% of the total residential electricity consumption in the Indian households. Some background information about the Energy Efficiency Services Limited or EESL. What is this Energy Efficiency Services Limited? It was founded in the year 2009, promoted by the Ministry of Power as a joint venture initiative of 4 public sector undertakings. What are these 4 public sector undertakings? National Thermal Power Corporation of India Limited or NTPCL, Power Finance Corporation of India Limited or PFCL, Rural Electrification Corporation Limited REC, and the Power Grid Corporation of India Limited. So, these are the 4 public sector undertakings in collaboration with the Ministry of Power have launched Energy Efficiency Services Limited as a joint venture initiative. NTPCL, PFCL, RECL and Power Grid Corporation of India. Energy Efficiency Services Limited is one of the main implementation arms or nodal agencies for implementing the National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency, which in itself is a mission under the National Action Plan on Climate Change. Energy Efficiency Services Limited, a joint venture initiative of the Ministry of Power and 4 public sector undertakings, is the nodal agency for the implementation of the National Mission for Enhancing the Energy Efficiency, and this National Mission on Enhancing the Energy Efficiency is in itself a submission under the National Action Plan on Climate Change. Some of the flagship programs of this joint venture Energy Efficiency Services Limited include Unnat Jyoti by Affordable LEDs for All or Ujala scheme. Unnat Jyoti by Affordable LEDs for All, popular as Ujala scheme, to distribute LED bulbs across the country. Furthermore, Street Lighting National Program, Smart Meter National Program, Buildings Energy Efficiency Program. These are some of the flagship programs or initiatives taken up by this joint venture Energy Efficiency Services Limited under the Ministry of Power. Also in news was Legal Identity and Rights Based Written Management Conference. Legal Identity and Rights Based Written Management Conference. This conference was organized by International Organization for Migration or IOM in Copenhagen, Denmark. What are the outcomes of this discussion or conference? It discussed globally that over 1 billion people lack legal identity, becoming state invisible and thereby restricting services access and also mobility. According to this conference, it was identified that 1 billion people lack legal identity and thereby becoming state invisible and also getting restricted by services accessibility and also mobility. International Organization for Migration. It was organized within the framework of International Organization for Migration's Global Program for Enhancing Readmission and Legal Identity Capacities, or RELICA, which was launched in 2022. So, this legal identity and rights based return management conference organized by the IOM was organized within the framework of the IOM's Global Program for Enhancing Readmission and also Legal Identity Capacities, known as RELICA, which was launched in 2022. Now, what is RELICA? RELICA is a global program which uses an evidence-based approach to working with selected countries on readmission and also for conferring legal identity to enhance efficient migration management. Some important background information about the International Organization for Migration, IOM or IMO. It was established in the year 1951. It is an integral part of the United Nations system or UN system. The mandate is to promote humane and orderly migration for the benefit of everyone. It has 175 member countries in it, including India. Hunger Hotspots Report was also in news. The report is launched by the Food and the Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the World Food Program or WFP. So, United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and World Food Program have launched the Hunger Hotspots report very recently. What are the highlights of this Hunger Hotspots report? Hunger hotspots comprise a total of 22 countries or territories, including 2 regional clusters across the world. These hotspots have populations that are either experiencing or are expected to experience critical levels of acute food insecurity. For the period between November 23 to April 24, Burkina Faso, Mali, South Sudan remain at the highest concern level, whereas Pakistan and Afghanistan are included as the hotspots of very high concern. The countries which are included in the highest concern level include Burkina Faso, Mali, South Sudan and Sudan. All these 4 countries belong to Africa, and Pakistan and Afghanistan are included as the hotspots of very high concern. Systematic voters education and electoral participation, popular as sweep, was also in news. The Election Commission of India has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Education to introduce electoral literacy into the curriculum of classes 6th to 12th in all the schools. This initiative is in line with the Election Commission of India's flagship program called SWEEP, Systematic Voters Education and Electoral Participation. SWEEP was launched for spreading voter awareness and education and also for promoting voter literacy in India. This is an initiative of the Election Commission of India basically to spread awareness and education among the voters and also to increase and promote voter literacy and their participation in the elections in India. The objective of SWEEP is to increase voter turnout or voter percentage to 75% in the Lok Sabha elections of 2024. Also, to enhance the quality of electoral participation of voters in terms of informed and ethical voting practices. These are some of the objectives of the SWEEP initiative by the Election Commission of India. White hydrogen was also in news. What is this white hydrogen? Scientists have discovered a large reservoir of white hydrogen in France. What is white hydrogen? White hydrogen is also referred to as natural, gold or geologic hydrogen. Now, what exactly is white hydrogen? It is naturally generated within the Earth's crust through water and rock reactions. The process involves interactions between the water molecules and iron-rich minerals such as olivine and high temperatures and pressures. By way of a process where the water molecules and the iron-rich minerals interact with each other at high temperatures and pressures, this naturally generated white iron is formed within the Earth's crust. The potential applications of the white hydrogen that is naturally occurred includes in industries like aviation sector, shipping sector, and also in steel production activities. Zika virus was also in news. Why? Because this Zika virus was detected in mosquito samples near Bengaluru, Karnataka. Some important information about Zika virus. Zika virus is primarily transmitted by Aedes mosquito, which bite mostly during the day. These Aedes mosquitoes basically or generally bites mostly during the day times, and the Zika virus is primarily transmitted by this Aedes mosquito. Same Aedes mosquito also transmits dengue, chikungunya and yellow fever. So, Aedes mosquito and the bite of Aedes mosquito is considered to be the reason for the transmission of not only Zika virus but also dengue, chikungunya and yellow fever. Zika virus infection is associated with Guillain-Barré syndrome, neuropathy, mellitus, and in particularly adults and older children. So, this Zika virus shows its symptoms mostly in adults and also in older children, adolescent adults and also in older children. This Zika virus incidence was first identified in Uganda in a rhesus macaque monkey. It is transmitted from mother to fetus also during pregnancy through sexual contact, transfusion of blood. No vaccine is still developed for combating this Zika virus and its prevalence. So, no vaccine is yet available for its prevention.